Spurs need more players like Romero that don't give a shit about the opposition and show zero respect. This was honestly unbelievable here from Romero. He's even chasing after him again there, and he's kicking the stand. He's just an absolute madman here.
The transfer shot, you can make the argument to go, let's do a Brighton, let's do a Leicester, where you back the ownership, you back the scouts to figure it out and go and pay 10, 15 million pounds for unknown players. And some of them will work, some of them won't. Some of them will take time to mature. But I don't think that's going to satisfy Tottenham fans. Or you get behind the idea of spending 60, 70, 80 million pounds on made up players. And some of them aren't going to work either. And when they don't work, that's also going to be used against the ownership at Tottenham.
I actually think that's how you should go about it. I don't think it's really realistic for anybody to expect their football club to be a blank check, just sort of sign whatever players above 60 million that looks good type of club, kind of like Chelsea, Man United, etc. right now. I just don't really see that as a realistic way to run things. I don't see that as a smart way to run things.
I think this January is more important than last January. And for me, the reason why is last January, it was about trying to improve that squad to be able to make top four. This season, we're in top four.
Yes, everyone, welcome back to the IrishHotspur podcast, the Tottenham Weekly podcast. And if you can't tell already, we are joined by a guest here, Sean, our partner in crime from Spurs Talk Show. All one word, everybody, if you do want to check it out, is going to be joining us today. We have some interesting topics lined up, and we also as well have plenty of topics given to us by the fans, given it to us by the Harris Army. But before we get straight into it, before we get into the business, let's welcome some people in. Maybe normally I welcome in Dave first, but I'm actually going to welcome in Sean. Sean, how are we?
Well, Jack, thank you for having me, mate. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm actually, like I said to you before, enjoying a Topo Chico, snowing outside, a little chilly, but, good vibes here. And we had a good discussion in the back end about these topics we're going to discuss today. Hopefully we can keep that sort of same energy going into it. But Sean, good to have you here. I know we're going to have a good discussion today. And Dave, how are we keeping?
Absolutely jealous. Jack, you have snow over there. I wish I could have some Seattle snow cones, but unfortunately they're not on the menu for Dave today. But what is on the menu though, Jack, is Tottenham are back next week, which is very, very exciting. The Premier League returns, that means Tottenham returns. So let's go. I can't wait.
Let's go, everybody. Like we always do, we want to get started on the socials. Hit that like button while you're in here. And if you are listening to on the podcast platform, we'll try to describe these socials as best we can. Mark New with the first one. Big up, Mark New, saying, what do Arsenal and Tottenham fans have in common? They're both obsessed with Tottenham. Come on, you Spurs. Come on, you Harris Army. Come on, you Flat Cap Army. I even remember, actually, when Arsenal and Chelsea played each other this season, everybody put out those gifs of, like couples holding hands, making out on the beach and, things like that. It really is probably a lot of teams' favorite thing to do is just kind of join in their hatred of Tottenham. Patty here. Yes, this can come back to bite you in the arse, but I absolutely love it. Spurs need more players like Romero that don't give a shit about the opposition and show zero respect. This was honestly unbelievable here from Romero. He's even chasing after him again there, and he's kicking the stand. He's just an absolute madman here. And we also saw as well.
He sent him back to Halloween, Jack.
Oh, he certainly did. He made a very angry Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. He made him look very, very angry. Life comes at you fast in football. Well done, Cootie, says Patty. Absolute brilliant work yet again from Patty's Twitter, everybody. So if you haven't already checked it out, do check it out. Absolute legend. And then Digital Spurs Sean said, such a shame that Eric Lamela can't come into this game in the 87th minute and collect 2 quick yellows. Definitely.
It's true. I miss him. I miss Coco. I think he was, I think we we under-egged the pudding on his valuation because I think he could have done a lot of good things for Tottenham in the short term, but also just moments like that, he was memorable for. So. Yeah,
absolutely.
Shame.
And if anything with Lamela, it actually would have been, he would have picked up, a yellow card, then would have gotten away with 3 red card challenges after that and somehow would have still stayed on the pitch.
Scored a Rabona and then got sent off.
I think what's even funny about Lamella is he gets, a yellow card, guaranteed yellow card, but he was actually quite clever about, sort of getting away with things kind of after that. He was always a bit more tactful than people ever realized. But there you are, everybody. Good little warm up on the socials. And we're going to get to our first Jim White moment, a very early Jim White moment here from Ian Ferguson. Thank you very much, Ian. And he's asking us, guys, about Hugo. He says, if France wins the World Cup this weekend, what do you say to the folks who think Hugo should finish out the rest of the season in net, especially given some of his more questionable decisions he's made this season? Love him to death, but we have to start planning for the future here very soon. Sean, I'm going to come to you first. Where do we stand on Hugo? Like, what's your opinion? Because I'm going to get to mine, but I don't want to spoil it. So, like, where do you stand with Hugo right now?
I still have faith in him above our substitute. I found out yesterday that our man in the background, the 6'4" giant that he is, gets paid 75 grand a week. And whilst I understand the reason why he gets paid so much money, because he was on a free transfer, I don't think that in and of itself is a reason to think about his playing time. I know he had the game against Nottingham Forest, and I think he did a really good job. But Fraser Foster, for me, is not going to be the solution. I know that Hugo's had a tough couple of games, made a couple of mistakes, and his mistakes are always amplified to the worst degree. But for me, he's still our champion. I do think that it is the time, I don't think it's a priority this January, but in the summer, we absolutely have to go out big and find the next, whoever he is going to be, the next replacement for him. But for me right now, I think that Hugo still is my number one at Tottenham, and Fraser Foster should only really be employed either in FA Cup games or if Hugo gets injured. I'll stand by him.
I think a lot of people probably, that might be the more commonly held opinion, but I'm going to be quite brave with mine in just a second here. But Dave, where do you stand with Hugo at this moment? Do you feel like Ian Ferguson's question here is kind of worth talking about because he's looked a bit sketchy this season? His World Cup was convincing in some games, less convincing in others. Where do you stand with Hugo right now, Dave?
I think it's a good job France didn't win the World Cup, because that's when Hugo Lloris got his drink driving ban for drinking the red wine that time after they won it. So, and plus, he might have wanted to go out on top. So the last 6 months, up until the summer or whatever else, he might have just kind of not been with it or as dedicated. So it's a good job they didn't win the World Cup, and hopefully now it keeps him focused that he wants to make that Euros. But I'm not naive to see that there is a decline in maybe athleticism that Hugo has. I mean, 3 of the penalties yesterday, all really in and around him, to be honest with you, and he just couldn't get down quick enough to any of them. And there was one shot that came at him and he pushed it out when he could have caught it comfortably. A couple of times this tournament, he's been caught out with crosses into the box from various angles. So there is an obvious decline in ability there, and we've seen that as Tottenham fans this season. Look, for me, I still think he's one of the best shot stoppers in world football. I still think, he can help us out to the end of the season. But for me, I think he's playing for his career, or he's number one spot between now and the end of the season. So it's all down to how he reacts. But regardless, even if he does have a good spell, we still need to bring in his long-term replacement in here. Just because we have to have that concession plan. And Hugo's also previously stated when he signed his last contract that he wants to help Tottenham identify the next keeper and work with him before he moves on and before he retires. So hopefully we can follow that plan through. But for me, between now and the end of the season, I don't think it's priority we go into the January transfer market and buy a goalkeeper. I think that can be put on the back burner till the summer.
I feel like probably Japan wished that they came up against Hugo when all their penalties, because they probably would have scored a few of them, let's say, because it really was actually, like you said, very unathletic from Hugo. Apparently, he is actually one of the worst penalty stoppers, really, just in general. Like, the guy really doesn't seem to have any idea what he's doing. It sort of feels like he even just kind of just guesses each and every time, doesn't really even guess with any sort of accuracy either. It felt like Messi embarrassed him on both occasions with the penalty, and it's not even like Messi is really like the most notorious. He's a great penalty taker, but he's not like the best of all time or anything either. Like, he's missed a few in his career, and he really did embarrass Hugo on both occasions. One of the ones as well was really just right next to Hugo, and Hugo like tripped or fell, or his feet were like stuck in the ground on one of the penalty saves. He is starting to kind of show that probably that age, or that maybe a lot of that sort of cat-like ability that maybe Hugo's always been kind of given credit for is starting to maybe go away, or is maybe not as, I don't know, prevalent in a lot of his sort of saves. And I must be honest, guys, I think I probably have less faith in Hugo for the rest of the season, to answer Ian's question here, than you guys do. I actually think it is someone like Fraser Forster. Like you said, Sean, not someone I would trust for like 2 seasons or anything, but I'm actually very much considering playing Fraser Forster more and actually giving him more of a chance, because if it means 6 months, as long as we have somebody that can be a little bit less, I would say, clangerful than Hugo, because he's been very, very poor with his feet. He's not really exactly saved us in a bunch of games, except for Man United maybe was the game where he probably kept us in it, but we already kind of lost that game anyways. So you sort of look at Hugo's kind of has cost us more games, I think, this season than he has saved us. And I know a goalkeeper is a position, Sean, that we always like to probably maybe put a lot of sort of blame on, because it is the nature of the position that you kind of make a mistake and it looks really bad compared to other positions. But I don't know, it's still, that's the whole nature of it, is that you want someone reliable, you want someone dependable, and you want someone that isn't going to have that clangor, or you don't even have to think about them having that clangor. And right now, I'll be honest, Sean, when we come up against Brentford, I'm thinking Hugo is probably saving up some major mistake against them, and whether it be because he kind of just seems to be nervous, for Spurs more recently, or maybe just because the Premier League, the pace of it, the intensity of it might just be too much for him. He also, as we know, doesn't have a great defense in front of him either, so he faces a lot more shots than he usually would. He also gets a lot of bad, sketchy back passes and things like that he doesn't handle very well. So I kind of am just at the stage where I just need someone that I feel like I can depend on, just to make simple, basic saves, just to be able to get the ball away when it gets passed back to them. Hugo always hits it out of play or gives it to the opponent. I'm just kind of feeling like, Sean, he didn't really earn back any faith from me over this World Cup. I thought he looked kind of similar to how he did for Spurs, maybe less sort of kind of sketchy, but still had plenty of moments where, you see like Upamecano give him a pretty easy back pass and then he ends up just booting it out of play for no reason whatsoever. I think all that sort of stuff is going to come through again for Hugo. So I'm actually thinking you sort of split maybe the time between Hugo and Fraser Forster, and then maybe a month in, you try to see which one actually has come out the best. I don't think that's a realistic way of going about it. I don't think managers do just kind of split time between goalkeepers like that. But if there were a way to maybe see if Fraser Forster is better than Hugo for the rest of the season,
I think there is.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see Fraser Forster be given that chance to prove that maybe he is better for the rest of the season, just for the rest of the season.
Fraser Forster's only had one game in first team football for Tottenham against Nottingham Forest in the Cup. And despite us losing, I think it was 2-0, he didn't disappoint. I think he was very good in that particular game. There's a couple of certainties that I would absolutely use Fraser for Lloris if to get into any situations along the path towards maybe a cup final. If it looks like we're going to a penalty shootout, then you absolutely, in my opinion, you replace Hugo Lloris for the Goliath that is Fraser Forster. I'm not saying that Hugo Lloris isn't awful, because he's had it. In my last year, 18 months, I can remember him making 2 or 3 saves. But you want people that fill the goal up in a penalty shootout, and Fraser Forster does a better job of that than Hugo Lloris. What I would say is that we don't really know what Fraser Forster at Tottenham has been like, apart from that one game. I do think that now Hugo Lloris is going to have maybe a week, 2 weeks off after his World Cup exploits. Then we're going to see him, at least for the Brentford game. Fraser Forster is going to definitely come in, I would imagine, for the Brentford game. And then I would even imagine him maybe playing in the Aston Villa game. So let's use these 2 games to see how he does. If he gets through the 2 games with 2 clean sheets and a couple of good saves, then maybe there's a strengthening argument there to give him a run of game time. I don't think there's any need to rush Hugo Lloris back for Brentford. When it comes to the other arguments about whether Perisic should be playing or whether Romero should be playing, I think that maybe, I don't know about that one. Maybe there's a conversation to be had there about whether we need them more than they need a break. But Hugo Lloris, I think, can take some time off, have his little break, and let's give Fraser Forster a game over maybe the next 1 or maybe even 2 games, and let's see how he does before we make any kind of wild judgments about Hugo Lloris for the rest of the season.
I'm kind of probably already gave my wild judgments already on Hugo. You guys have been a bit more well behaved than I have. Dave, any kind of final things to add to this kind of Hugo conversation? Do you agree with Sean? Maybe actually Forster could be given a chance against Brentford, maybe even a chance against Villa. That's whether we really do read into this situation of whether Forster is actually good enough.
Well, look, I think he'll get the game against Nice in 2 days' time. I think
True.
I think, there's potential he'll start against Brentford. Now, look, a lot of people would argue that these players coming back from the World Cup, they can have their break at the end of the season. This is what they signed up for. This is what they paid the big money for. Go through, get back into it and get into the games. But someone like Hugo, I think you could give him a bit of a mental break, sit him out against Brentford for a number of reasons. I mean, Brentford are going to play a lot of long balls, a lot of high balls. Last season, they dominated us from corner kicks. Someone like Fraser Forrester, who can come out and claim them, he's a big guy, rather than Hugo, who we've seen being caught out a number of times, even against England, from balls into the box. I think there's benefits there. But he's also going to have the FA Cup game against Portsmouth, probably beat them, and he'd probably have another couple of FA Cup games as well to prove his worth. He might very well find his way into the starting lineup by the end of the season. But what I will say is, and we have to take this on board, Hugo Lloris is the captain. Now, whether we like it or not, he is not going to change his captain midway through the season. It's just not going to do it. So on that basis, I think he stays as number one until the end of the season regardless.
That probably will be the likely scenario, but it seems like Dave and Sean have devised that actually Forster is going to be given some opportunities here, and whether he takes them, whether he takes advantage of them, that's up to him. But if he does perform well, and if he does end up actually impressing us, I think we'll be having this conversation again here, everybody, about Hugo. Just also quickly on kind of the goalkeeper discussion, we have had an itch suggestion here from Daniel Larson. Jack's new itch, Livakovic, the keeper for Croatia. He had a brilliant World Cup. What do we think of him as a goalkeeper? Could he be a Lloris replacement, says Daniel Larson. Here's where I stand on Livakovic, guys. I think he actually has some similarities to kind of an old or kind of younger Hugo, should I say, of being very kind of, springy, has that sort of cat-like reactions and moments, really can pull off some crack saves at times, I think, Livakovic. And it actually probably was, I think, secretly probably kind of the second best goalkeeper of the tournament. I thought maybe Emi Martinez, just because he was the World Cup winner, definitely did deserve it, and he did save them at the end there. But Livakovic, I thought, was basically the sole reason that Croatia made it as far as they did. Basically, him and Gvardiol were just unbelievable at keeping goals out of their own nets. So I would say Livakovic has impressed me a lot this tournament, Daniel. He has some similarities to Hugo in that he's not exactly the biggest leader, not very vocal, I would say, either. So there's something to be said there that he will have some kind of similarities to Hugo in some aspects, but I think he also will bring some kind of new kind of dynamism, that athleticism, that sort of kind of just young goalkeeper springiness that we're kind of just looking for, that maybe Hugo has kind of lost. Sean or Dave, any strong opinions on Livakovic?
I think he's going. Well, I've read he's might be going to Manchester United. I've seen lots of news reports the last couple of days. For me, I think he had a great World Cup, but I also think that there's other better goalkeepers out there that have been tried and tested, and that until recently I've seen that Manchester United are looking at, and that would otherwise pay big money for those players in their salaries that Tottenham couldn't compete with. Jan Oblak being a good example. I would rather Manchester United went and signed Livakovic than Tottenham, and I'd rather then that leave the door open for Tottenham to go and sign somebody who can come in at third. He's only a couple of years older than that kid, and come in with all of the experience that he's got from his Atletico Madrid days. I'd love Jan Oblak as my first choice. So if Man United want to go after Livakovic because of a World Cup superstar performance, then so be it. But I've learned over my long 9 years on this planet, I've learned that World Cup performances don't always turn into good club signings. So I'd rather go for Jan Oblak, and I'd much rather United go and sign this guy, and then Tottenham sign somebody like Jan Oblak.
Absolutely, I see that.
I think he's a very good shot stopper. I mean, the guy I've watched him play that group game against Chelsea, unbelievable. He had a good performance against us out in Zagreb as well when we went out of the Europa League that time under Jose. He's a good goalkeeper, Jack. And for me, I think off the back of the World Cup, he's definitely earned his move. And he comes from a club in Croatia that's known as just a talent mill. They've produced most of that Croatian side. And for me, any player you're getting from that Croatian side, the majority of them are good enough. But this is one where you'd have to go and do a bit more background on it. You can't just solely sign him off the World Cup or the game against Tottenham or Chelsea. You have to see how he performs against teams where maybe he's not as busy. Is there mistakes in his games when he's not relied upon as much, this, that, and the other? But also, when I'm looking at us signing Hugo Lloris's long-term replacement, for me, I want a guy that, rectifies a lot of our problems, which is getting out from the back on the ball. How many times does the ball go back to Hugo? It's either misplaced, but even when it does go back to him, he's erratic, he's nervous on the ball, it's just balloon. We need someone that's very good on the ball. And the way that the keepers are going nowadays, they have to do both sides of the game. And for me, I do think there's better out there on the ball than him that has a passing range similar to an Alisson, similar to an Ederson, like a young Gavin Bazunu. I think, there's plenty of goalkeepers that didn't make the World Cup that are better than this guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And to be fair, like, we need a really excellent goalkeeper. I think often, like, actually kind of the secret to a really good side, especially even a really good defense, is actually having a goalkeeper that keeps a lot of, just safe. And is Livakovic that guy? Could be that guy. I probably might have a bit more faith in Jan Oblak. I might agree with Shawnee there. But let's get to the good discussion here. A good topic today provided by Carl Simpson, also with a bit of help from Sean as well. But he's given us our Jim White moment for today. And he says, where do you see Spurs in 5 years? What would it take for all Spurs fans to get along and sing from the same hymn sheet? He's kind of speaking all about as well when it comes to where do you see Spurs in 5 years. He kind of also referenced the owners, the players, kind of just the whole sort of situation. Where do you see Spurs in 5 years, and how can we maybe get everybody to sing from the same hymn sheet? Before we kind of tie in this other little topic, I think we could just kind of get warmed up with this kind of question here from Carl. Dave, I'm going to go to you first actually here and just see what you have to say. What do you maybe say to Carl? Where would you maybe see Spurs in 5 years? And also, how do you think maybe Spurs fans can maybe get on the same page?
Look, where do I see Spurs in 5 years? Look, it's hard to predict because there's a lot of different variables that go with that. Do we keep Paratici and Conte, or are we on to a new project, or how many new projects are we on going into this period, over this 5 years? Like, is it going to be a similar period to the last 5 years? Are the owners still going to be here? The devaluation of the club, you would like to think with the price of football clubs nowadays, are they satisfied with the price it's at? Are they going to look to sell? And look, for the second part of the question, Jack, I don't think you'll ever get Spurs fans all on singing from the same hymn sheet, if I'm being brutally honest. Like, they're always going to be divided no matter what. They're going to be divided on the manager. Some people are going to like him. Some people are not going to like him. Some people are going to like the style of play. Some people won't. They'll be divided on the director of football, as we see already. They'll be divided on the ownership. Even if we get rid of this ownership and the next ownership come in, there's still going to be fractions. And it might not necessarily be the fractions now that aren't happy with the ownership. It could be an entirely new fraction that just aren't happy with the new ownership, depending on what sort of owners take over the football club, this, that, and the other. So I don't think Spurs fans will ever get onto one hymn sheet. I think the closest I've seen it in my lifetime is probably under Pochettino, but that's because we were winning games around the silverware. Although we didn't get it over the line, the majority of people were sort of singing from the same hymn sheet with just minor problems like, we're one or two players away. But what I will say is I think we have to be smarter than that, and I think we should, at some stage, we're all going to have to get on the same hymn sheet, Jacko. It doesn't matter whether it's we're forced to, like Arsenal were under Mikel Arteta. You're going to be forced. We don't care what your thoughts are. We're going to stick with this guy, and you have to get behind him regardless of what you say, or whether we choose to do it. But for me, I see positives in the Paratici and Conte project. I also see that with these sort of guys here, there is a potential of trophies coming here if we keep going and keep building in the direction we're going. And I think if we can keep doing that, I think hopefully you will see the fan base calm down a bit. I wouldn't say you'll ever get them on the same hymn sheet, though.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that it's almost, and not even just football, just most cases of life, it's usually hard to get 100% agreement and 100% sort of kind of everybody on the same page. But Sean, what do you make of Carl's question here? And maybe even the latter part of the question is an interesting one, especially as we approach this January window. Sean, how do we get people on the same hymn sheet? How do we kind of get Spurs fans to maybe buy into, let's say, kind of the same project, the same, kind of a goal here? Maybe on mute, Sean.
Sorry. I don't think it's possible. I agree with Dave. I don't think it's possible to get everybody singing from the same hymn sheet. I think it's more possible to get the more people singing from the same hymn sheet if you choose and you redirect your path around one specific set of direction. And we spoke about this beforehand. I'm sure you've got another question coming behind this, so I don't want to sort of dwell on this too much right now. But for me, it would take the club to articulate a certain directive, like have a bit more communication that will allow us to know what is the vision, and then go with it, and ideally have some early success. Whatever that vision is, for people to kind of unify behind it, there needs to be some level of early success that proves that the vision works. The longer that time moves on, where you're still asking people for patience, you're still asking people to believe in the vision, even if the vision is clear and the directions of the ownership, the directions of the management, and the directions of the team are all pushing in the right direction. If it still doesn't have any tangible benefits that are measurable, then I think that people start to lose faith. There's always going to be people that are unhappy, and I'm sure we're going to discuss that in the next question, if I'm not mistaken, Jack.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be an element of the people that are ungrateful or unhappy with whichever path you choose, whether it's look at the youth or spend big. There's always going to be people that are thinking that we should be doing better. And for me, I don't think it's a reasonable objective for Carl to hope that all Spurs fans can get on board. Where I do see the club in 5 years, again, like Dave says, it depends largely not just on what we do, but also what happens externally. For me, I've said this a million times. Anyone who's listening or watching who knows me will know that I try and consider my opinions are based on external factors that are influencing trends, the opportunity to find success, as much as what's happening within Tottenham. In 5 years, for me, I see the threat of Newcastle, the threat of Liverpool under a new ownership, the threat of Manchester United under a new ownership. I also reflect on the previous 5-10 years and say maybe some of the reasons why we haven't had the success that we've had is because of the influence of ridiculous sums of money that are coming in. So it's very difficult to with Manchester City, with Chelsea, with Arsenal back in their own management systems. So for me, it's incredibly difficult to predict what's going to happen in 5 years. I do think there's going to be an increased trend towards inflation in the financial markets. I think that in the next 5 years, you're going to see a player that earns, £500 million a year. And I think you'll probably see the first £1 billion transfer in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
If Tottenham want to be a participant in success in the next 5 years, then we need to have owners, whether these guys or the next guys, we need to have owners that are participating in that reality. That money is the root of all evil, but the route to success, and you have to shake hands with that. So I need to see either a more liberal approach to risk tolerance from our ownership, or I need to see our ownership move on, take their 200 times return on investment, and let somebody else take over, and then let them handle the process from there on.
I agree with that. Yeah. It's like Dave, what he brought up there, though, is like seeing Spurs in 5 years. Part of that has to do with how does the landscape of the Premier League look like in 5 years? Like, are there going to be 2 more Newcastles in the Premier League? Are there going to be even more kind of ridiculous sums, that people are throwing at each other? Does it become even more kind of, as I put earlier, kind of fantastical about like kind of the money that's being tossed around? And that's also part of the question is not only how do Spurs see themselves? Yeah.
Just before you move on to Dave's answer, I heard what I said there in real time, and I was wrong. I do think you'll see £1 billion valuation of a player. I do think someone like Mbappe might go for £1 billion sort of transfer value. That's not, but I don't think a player is going to earn 500 million in a year. That I think is out. So I misspoke, but
That's
I think
okay.
that you're going to see those
They're
elevated
already
valuations. You know,
there are already $1 billion release clauses in people's contract already, so you're not far off there. But Dave, yeah, I cut you off. What did you want to say,
sorry
Dave?
guys. Yeah.
No, I was going to say as well, I do think the club could be doing better to try and maybe get the majority of fans sort of on side or on board of a vision, because since under Pochettino, there was a vision there. We brought in players, we developed them, we developed a very nice starting 11, and we went close. But since then, you know, we've had Jose, we've had Nuno, we've had Conte, and all like even Jose and Conte, like they both have different ideas on players, what direction they want to go in, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. So I think the board also have to sit down and get behind the project, even if things aren't working out for a slight period of time. Continue to back it, continue to believe in that project. And if even the likes of Levy, Paratici, and Conte, if they could all be on one page as well, this is our vision. I think the communication from the club to the fan base could be a bit better at times. And maybe that could heal some of the divide that's currently in the fan base at the minute.
Absolutely. But maybe we could actually answer your question there, Carl. And it's a very good question with kind of a question of our own here. So hopefully you'll let us do that, Carl. Answer your question with a question of our own. What type of transfer strategy suits Tottenham best? And this sort of question is inspired by how do we maybe go about, the landscape of the Premier League? How do Spurs maybe find success? How do we maybe go about things and maybe make that sort of strategy more transparent to the fans? And how do we make sort of like the goals and the kind of the manners in which Spurs go about sort of their business more kind of understandable for the fans? And there's probably a few different ways that Spurs could go after it. There's kind of that sort of Brighton model right now where they kind of identify talent early, buy them quite cheap, end up probably selling them on for triple the price, make a huge profit from it, and sort of run it like a tight, very kind of well-run ship. Or do you maybe go towards that strategy, that transfer strategy, like kind of a lot of the Premier League teams are going towards, which is spending big, spending as much money as you can, as long as you're staying competitive, as long as you're staying in that sort of kind of top four kind of bracket area. And as long as you're spending the money, you're probably going to stay up there. It's kind of two very different sort of transfer strategies. One would say one is a bit of the cheaper kind of I don't know how you put it, maybe more profit incentivized kind of a strategy, while the other one is kind of, as people like to put, with air quotes, very ambitious, very big club mentality. I think both, though, actually have their pros, and I think both definitely actually have their cons as well. But I don't know, Sean, I'm going to kind of give you credit for this one here, because this is sort of something that's been on your mind, this sort of kind of question, and this sort of kind of transfer strategy / just, strategy in general for Tottenham. How do Tottenham want to go about their business in the next few years, and how can they make it clear to Spurs fans what type of strategy that is?
And I'm going to add another question on the back of that, just because you're the financial expert as well. Looking at the finances, what strategy can Spurs use going forward?
Well said, Dave.
Yeah, interesting, mate. And I dropped the video today about the 50 million quid that we, thank you, mate, the 50 million quid that we haven't yet taken, and there's 13 days, I think, before we have to take it. And if we don't take it, what sort of intent does that signify? And my hopes on that are pretty poor, pretty low, and so I'm naturally kind of progressing a little bit down that path towards questioning on serious levels, like, what does this ownership actually intend, and how committed they are. Look, Jack, it's a super detailed question, man. I think this conversation we can have. I'm going to say a little bit about my opinion on it, and then we can pass it round, right, and then come back, and because I think this one deserves quite a lot of.
Yeah.
So for me, the reason why I kind of positioned this to you guys was I'm of the opinion that Spurs fans generally, and I don't mean this to any disrespect to any particular fan who's listening or watching, but I think that there's a little bit of it's natural. It's natural with anyone who's got passion about things to expect the most and to have very little wiggle room in their own mind for anything less than the very best. Their expectations are always up here, despite how where the real baseline of reality is.
Sure.
And in my experience, and I've only been on this realm for 38 years, but in my experience, I always find like that that people aren't happy regardless of what the path has been chosen, unless success is delivered. And success can be perceived, conceived, whatever, on a subjective level. But people will, if you don't have success, then it doesn't matter whether you thought this was the path or that was the path. If it didn't lead to success, it's very easy for the individual who doesn't control any of the outcomes to pivot and say, well, that didn't work, I wanted it the other way.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, when it comes to Tottenham strategy, I get the impression from listening and talking to people, thousands of people, I get the impression that I'm not sure what it is that any of us want. If we go out and spend massive money, just looking at Tottenham's recent history, if we go out and spend club record signings, we're happy when they happen, but then when they don't work out, we criticize the approach.
Yeah.
We're also unimpressed by the idea of signing players that are not big names when we haven't signed them. And then you shoot forward 12 as players emerge on the world scene or on the international scene as superstars that we can either still acquire, but we have to pay 4 times more for. And a lot of fans are then okay with signing for them because they've suddenly seen the merit of that they didn't want 6 months earlier at a cheaper price, and they were rolling their eyes saying it's a Levy signing, it's a typical Tottenham thing, but now they want them, but they didn't want them before. And you could there's so many examples. There's Kim Min-jae, there's Sofyan Amrabat right now that's emerging. A lot of players, a lot of people that I speak to right now, they're like, why can't we go and sign him? But I remember them saying 11 months ago that they didn't want them. So I feel like Tottenham fans generally are never like. I don't mean it to sound disrespectful to Tottenham fans because I'm not saying it about any individual person, but there's a general shift of they were unhappy that we didn't get Luis Diaz. They thought the Kulusevski was second choice, third choice. He was a reject. Now he's the superstar at Tottenham, and everything pivots around him. There's no faith in the exercise unless the exercise has proven to yield results, and it diminishes the value of the opinion, in my opinion. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't know what is the best transfer. So I'm rambling here. I'm going to pass over now, so I'll hear you guys' thoughts and we can pivot back. But for me, the transfer you can make the argument to go, let's do a Brighton, let's do a Leicester, where you back the ownership, you back the scouts to figure it out and go and pay 10, 15 million pounds for unknown players. And some of them will work, some of them won't. Some of them will take time to mature. But I don't think that's going to satisfy Tottenham fans. Or you get behind the idea of spending 60, 70, 80 million pounds on made up players. And some of them aren't going to work either. And when they don't work, that's also going to be used against the ownership at Tottenham. So I'm not sure what the best model is. I think Tottenham currently enveloped this kind of middle zone where we don't want to pay, we can't afford 100 million pound players. We can't attract 100 million pound players. And when we do go and spend 20 million on the lesser known players that are still valuable enough to have to pay a premium for, we don't give them enough time to develop. And so for me, as a fan base, we don't know what we want. And if we don't know what we want, I'm not sure how we can hold the ownership accountable for trying things out and in their mind getting it wrong all the time. And I'm going to stop. I'm going to pivot now to let you guys go for it, and because I'm sure there's loads more to talk about this one.
Dave, so many light bulbs there that John has given me. What has he, maybe said there that is kind of, what are you thinking about, Dave, after what John has just said?
Look, for me, I actually think that I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I think you can do both. And I think we are starting to try and do both. You look under the signings under Paratici, some of the youngsters we brought in, Gil, Papa Matasar, people like that. But then some of the experienced players that we brought in here, and Ivan Perisic, you know, and then we brought in some of what were perceived middle of the range players like a Bentancur, Kulusevski, people like that.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, I think bringing in the right players to bring you to a certain level or to bring you in trophies, but building in a smart way, I think getting yourself to that level, a bit like what Liverpool done. They picked up some good players here and there. They got it to a point. They sprinkled it with some star talent. And then once they went on and took everything in, then you started signing the likes of Harvey Elliott, Carvalho, along with some other star talented players. And I think it's hard to get there, but once you get there, you're there, and that's when you start doing. I don't think we're too far away from being at the point where we're going to start sprinkling it with some 60, 70, 80 million pound signings. I think one might even come this summer. I think we're at that point where you don't need to start. We need to bring him in. He's a good player, steady player, bring him in, because we don't have as many squad places to fill as we did last season. So I think we're at a good point where we can start bringing these guys in. But here's the catch. It's about doing your research into these guys. Tottenham have tried this before. Ndombele. No one questioned. And even me at the time. Why are we top of the queue at Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Man City? There's obviously something that warned them off the player that they're not going to be sucked into spending that big bucks. But we brought him in. We tried it years before with Soldado out the Gareth Bale money. Soldado never came in and brought the goals that we were supposed to deliver. Tried it with Lo Celso. Again, failed. You know, it's not only about spending that big money on a player, but it's also about doing the research into their sort of background, into that, what sort of person are they? Are they a driven person? Are they a person that needs to kick up the hole? And, you know, do they fit into your squad, this, that, and the other? So I think, for me, it lies somewhere in between. But I think we're on the right path. You get to the point where Liverpool are at, in and around the trophy, sprinkle it with one or two players in key positions, big money, and then that will then bring you the trophies. And then once you have some of the trophies, because we were close on the patch, then you can start doing a bit of both, like what Man City done with Alvarez and Haaland, for instance. You know, Haaland, big money. Alvarez, a young guy, which I got wrong, by the way. I said he's the next Lamela, completely wrong on that one. But, you know, they identified him from Argentina, brought him in here, you know. And I think Sean's right. As Spurs fans, sometimes rather than a player, like, because it happened with Kavic as well, link with him. No, that's a Levy signing. This,
no one wanted
sometimes
him, right?
We have,
exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes we have to be a bit, I would say, less reactionary, to be honest with you. Just less reactionary. Try and see what the club are trying to do with this
Trust
guy.
them.
You know, yeah, just trust them. Like, but look, it's hard to trust what's gone on before with Steve Hitchen, because it was wrong signing after wrong signing. You know, no one really came in here and impressed and stuff like that. Whereas I think now we're starting to get them right. But I do think we have to be more balanced in our judgments of these players. Bentancur, Kulu last year labelled rejects before they even kicked the ball at Tottenham.
Yeah.
Before they even kicked the ball. You know, anyone that knew about Kulusevski knew he was a talent, knew that there was a good player in there, knew that there was goals in the guy. You know, anyone that done the research on Bentancur, you know, the guys won trophies. You know, they knew that he was a hard worker, that he was technically gifted. And, you know,
Dave, let me ask you a question.
Do you judge these players?
Do you think that that Spurs fans on the general were more excited about Ndombele, as much or as little as they may have known about him, by the fact that it was a £60 million price tag, versus Kulusevski or Bentancur, knowing that Kulusevski was a second choice behind Diaz, even though, as you know, with the time we spoke about this at the time, we all wanted Kulusevski above Luis Diaz anyway, because we knew that Diaz wasn't the right, we didn't need him ahead of Kulusevski. He had the better utility. But the average Spurs fan, do you think that they're a little bit clouded by, like, the rumors of players that are not worldies yet, but when they've got a price tag associated with it of 60 versus a price tag of 20, people think, you know, I think I remember people being super, myself included.
They look at it as settling for less. That's just what it is. They look at it as settling for less.
Yeah.
They look at it as Spurs would rather take a risk than maybe make it completely, you know, sure that they know that signing would work. A lot of people accuse Spurs of thinking that they would rather take a risk on a player than get the guy that they know is the proven sort of product. But where I kind of stand on this, lads, is that I agree that maybe it does lie somewhere in the middle. I am a big fan of the identify, talent early, develop them, sort of kind of go for the more savvy kind of approach, because I think that just speaks to them being a very well-run football club where you don't need to spend a ton of money. You have all the sort of systems in place to develop talent and to then sell them on for tons of money or keep them forever, however you want to look at it. But I think there are clubs that have proven, even in the Premier League, not just in foreign leagues, but in the Premier League, that is a successful strategy. Then again, though, Sean, while I love that strategy and while I would prefer that strategy over the spending the big bucks, we have to come to terms with how the Premier League landscape is changing, that thing that we brought up before. And it's like you maybe do have to mix in that sort of identify talent early sort of strategy with big money signings if you do want to stay in the top four, because the top four is going to get more competitive each and every season. I don't think getting into the top four is going to be blank check sort of signings for every single signing. I think you do need to mix it up, and I think you do need to find some sort of middle ground there. But like maybe brought up before, will the fans just continue, though, to kind of criticize that? Will they kind of look at a big money signing and be like, finally, Spurs showing some ambition, and then right after that signing, we'll sign the next Kavicha talent for 6 million or 7 million, and then we'll say, look, Daniel Levy, kind of what is it, selling, short again, or Daniel Levy, kind of looking for a cheap option again.
And Spurs fans have a short memory when it comes to successes and a long memory when it comes to failures. Right. Again, I'm not throwing people under the bus. I love every Spurs fan, and I'm one of you guys. But for me, it's a scenario of there's very little trust in the ownership to identify those players, and I understand why. But teams like Leicester and Brighton, who have a model of, it's a very clear model. We're gonna identify the best players that we can afford that are coming through the system in whichever country using our scouting network, and they get it right more than they get it wrong. Teams like Wolves probably have the best source of players, but sometimes they get it wrong more than they get it right. Otherwise, Wolves would be, competing on a higher level than they do, because Wolves have the ability to attract George says and the agency relationship. They have a lot of talent coming from South Europe, Southwestern Europe, in Portugal, etc. But there's a combination there, right? So not every team's going to get it right. Most of us just focus on the lesser teams that have the successes with their scouting. If Tottenham was to come out with some level of new paradigm and new vision, even if they were to, so many fans ask for this, just tell us what it is the plan is. Tell me. I need to hear the plan. And if the plan is, we're going to go young, we're going to go and we're going to build up and we're going to start from scratch, if that's it, then tell me, I'll be okay with it. I hear that rhetoric all the time because there's an absence of directive from the club. And I understand the frustration with the absence of directive. But if that was the general directive, people that are saying they'd be happy to hear it and happy to embrace it, they actually wouldn't, in my opinion. Those same fans would be super frustrated if the reality of that clause or that cause or that direction was that Tottenham slipped out of Europe and went back to mid-table for the next 3 or 4 years in the hope that some of those players would develop into competent players that you could then take on to another level. So I feel like there's a little bit of misdirection, Sorry.
Here's the thing at Tottenham. Now, I want to add something in here. Now, spending big money. Now, for me, I have a different definition of it. Spending big money is going out, putting in a bid for someone like an Mbappe and Neymar and bringing them in here. We're not in that category. After that, the selling club dictates what the selling price is. They dictate whether you get them in for big money or small money. But it doesn't matter how much the player is worth. It's all about the quality of the player and what he's going to add to your team. It doesn't matter how much you spend on that guy. Now, no one's ever going to get their transfer business 100% correct. But we get caught up in the money, big money. That's dictated by the selling club. We've seen it. You go back through some of our record signings down the years. Darren Bent didn't work out at Tottenham. Paulinho was the next one after him. Broke the record fee by $1 million. Didn't work out at Tottenham. Followed by Soldado. Didn't work out at Tottenham. Followed by Sanchez. Has not worked out at Tottenham. Followed by Ndombele. Has not worked out at Tottenham. All these guys have broke our transfer records consecutively. We don't spend that money well, the big money. What we have had success in Danny Rose, got him in early, developed him. Kyle Walker, Luka Modric. Jan Vertonghen was brought in as a relatively unknown quantity. Same as Christian Eriksen. People like this down the years where that's what we have done well in. So we know we do that well. So let's keep doing that. Let's keep identifying them. But also, let's keep staying in the market where what we done last summer, Kulusevski, Bentancur, not massive money, but they've had more of an impact than any of the big money signings, the record signings that we've brought. So that tells me it's all about the quality of the player you're bringing in here. Is it a key position for me? When you look at the January transfer window, you've got to look at a number of things. Is this guy going to come in and is he going to add to your squad between now and the end of the season and beyond that? Does he identify a position in that team where it's a weak point in your team? Does he
improvement
that?
needed?
Does he strengthen that? Does it stop making the mistakes that are maybe potentially holding you back? So there's a number of things you've got to look at as well. Is he a guy that's driven? Is he a guy that's hungry? So for me, it's not about the amount of money you spend. It's about what you spend it on. It's about spending on a good character, a player that's technically sound, a guy in this day and age that's not afraid to handle the ball, that can handle it in tight situations, a guy that has a bit of vision, a guy that's strong, takes no shit. It's all about how you spend it, identifying. Like basically what we need to do at Tottenham with Conte is that, okay, what sort of human being do you like? What attributes do you like? And bring the players in based off that, rather than, he's a 60 million pound player.
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
Just go and get him.
Can't buy him. He's only 30 million. Yeah.
You guys would recognize that.
And look how much it affected that dressing room. Look how much it split that dressing room.
But you know what, Dave? The strange thing for me is that most Tottenham fans should recognize that every single time in the last, 5 years that we've gone out and spent massive money, it hasn't worked. It didn't work on Sanchez. It didn't work on Lo Celso. It didn't work on Ndombele. I'm someone who thinks it won't work on Richarlison. Yet, at the very same time, I think most people, with the exception of Richarlison, I think some people are going to say that they believe in Richarlison. That's fine. But whilst everyone will accept that we have a really bad track record of spending big money, in the same moment, those same people that acknowledge that we have a horrible track record of spending big money, they don't want us to spend any more little money. And every time the idea...
Even though we found more success with that, strangely enough.
And every time that we go out and buy little money, or we're connected with little money or mediocre players in the idea of who's got the most brand, most like global brand at that stage, they roll their eyes and say typical Levy signing. And this is my frustration. As much as I am, and if you've been watching my channel, I'm slowly pivoting, incrementally pivoting, because I'm seeing more and more information every day that shapes my opinion slightly differently. I'm starting to see that maybe, Daniel Levy and Nick have taken us as far as we can go. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting there. But at the same time, I still want to hold people accountable for their opinions, and their opinions are a little bit hypocritical in that they want us to spend big whilst acknowledging that our experience spending big has never worked out. They don't want us to spend small because they think that they don't get the chances, and then they roll their eyes at the opportunities we didn't get, and now they want to sign the players that we could have signed back when they were rolling their eyes. And I feel like Tottenham fans need to recognize that you can't have it all. You can't have your cake and eat it. Like for me, if you want me to take your opinion seriously, and I love you, I love all of you, but you have to be a little bit consistent. And you criticize every single element of things that go wrong, and you wait until things go right before you get behind it. But then you don't have the same, the same support for the next time that the opportunity comes along.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Yeah, and actually, what you just said there, Sean, which strategy will the fans support, if any? I kind of find myself there. It's like, will they really accept that we do better at identifying talent early and developing them, getting those kind of cheaper players? I don't think they want to accept that. And it obviously is the case that we struggle at spending big. So it seems like we need to go for that middle ground, like Dave was saying. But we also have to come to terms with, when we spend big bucks, we usually fall flat on our face with it each and every time. So it's actually funny enough, weirdly, we're better at identifying kind of the cheaper talent and finding the diamonds in the rough, let's say, than we are finding the big name, ambitious sort of signings, like the big, the big club mentality type signings is actually where Spurs struggle at the moment. And it's actually where actually our improvement is needed in the transfer department. Is
Jack,
actually with
tell
the
me,
big
tell me
money
who the top 5, in your opinion, Jack, who are the top 5 signings that we have made in the last however far back you need to go, let's say 10 years, the most valuable 5 signings that we've made.
Sonny wasn't even that much. You look
Sonny.
at Bentancur, you look at Kulusevski gets in there. That's 3. Romero, probably one of the best signings, and Romero's probably the most expensive one, right? Of all the best signings.
Romero wasn't cheap.
That's 4. I'm trying to think of the 5th one. Dele Alli. And there's also others, like Dave brought up Eriksson, Moussa Dembele, and there are other examples as well.
None of them were a pittance, and none of them were club record signings.
Exactly.
Right? So we need to have a little bit more faith in this idea of, like, when you hear about Tottenham being linked with a £30 million player, maybe that's where you should have the faith.
That's where they do better.
that's where we seem to succeed, right?
Interesting point. I actually love this. Yeah, Dave.
Another thing on the January transfer window as well. I just want to touch on the outgoings quickly, Jack, because last year everyone got sucked into, we let out 3 and we brought in 2. The squad's weaker. Now, if you're looking at it as an numerical team, just the numbers on paper, you'd say obviously there's one less player. But we also have to measure the outgoings in terms of contribution. We can't get sucked into basing things on the numerical amount of players, the number of players we have. We have to look at it as the contribution. Last season, no one spoke about Dele Alli, Lo Celso, and Ndombele having 10 starts between them. They weren't used. He didn't want them around. So it was important to get rid of them. But then we were going on like, we weakened our squad. We brought in 2. But what we didn't weigh it up against is the player coming in here. What are the players coming in here going to bring? Competition for places. They want to be here. Good attitude. Hunger and appetite for the game at Tottenham. Hunger and appetite to do well at Tottenham where others has failed. Now, for me, I don't think we're in that situation this January, because I believe everybody that's here is on board and wants to be here, as they wouldn't be here. But unfortunately, we're at a point where now we have to start acting ruthless. We have to start getting rid of guys and analysing and going, look, thanks very much for your time at Tottenham. Unfortunately, going on to this next era, pushing on to this next platform where we want to go, which is challenging the top of the Premier League again, you're not good enough. And this is where Tottenham have failed in windows before. We hold on to players hoping that going to come good. We have to stop that. We have to just try and get rid of them at all costs. But as well, we also criticize how we get them out. Like Paratici, it's criticized that Paratici. I'm not making this Paratici thing, but it's criticized that, he can only loan players out. But we also have to understand that Tottenham, we put a value on these players, right? We say 20 million on wings, but the greater football world do not see that value. And we keep giving them contracts to try and maintain that value, this, that, and the other. And then we also go, why is he loaned out? If other clubs don't want to put up the money for him, that's not our fault, At the end of the day, the point is we're getting them out, and that's the main thing. They're nowhere near the squad, and by them being loaned out, eventually they're going to be shipped on. So they're going to have to instruct their agent to do better to find them a permanent solution rather than hang around at Tottenham, keep getting new contracts and think, this is cushy. But for me, let's not get sucked into, we let go of 3, brought into the squad's weaker. Let's actually start looking at the contributions of the players we're letting out compared to the players that we're bringing in and the pluses of it. And let's just try and analyze things properly this January.
Absolutely. And let's maybe not make the same mistakes that we did last, January, where we wrote off signings before they even got here as well, like criticize some of the outgoings. People criticized us for getting rid of all of our creative midfielders when all of those creative midfielders were an absolute problem at the club. Gio, Tanguy, Dele, he didn't want to use any of them. And I remember we got criticized for getting rid of those players. So let's just maybe Sean said earlier, let's actually trust this club every once in a while that actually they are going about it the right way. But Sean, maybe any kind of other points or other thoughts or final thoughts for both of you guys?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to jump in ahead of Sean here. I just want to add one more thing before Sean takes it off in a different direction. I just want to touch on the giving Paratici and Conte a chance. Look, even if you have your gripes with how the club have operated in transfer windows gone by in January's, like the you would say self-imposed January transfer embargoes under Pochettino, where sometimes we didn't sign players. Look, some will argue we had a statement bill at the time. There's reasons why, but I'm not getting into that today. But, let's not use that going into this January. Oh, Tottenham don't do business in January, because since then, Bergwijn was brought in January under Jose Mourinho. We brought in 2 players in January last season that actually worked. Many said squad's weaker, not good enough to get top 4, rejects, this, that, and the other. But what we actually done is we brought in quality over quantity. We identified key positions in the team that needed improving, brought them in, and they were, in hindsight, actually good enough to get us top 4. So for me, I think even if you don't like what the club has done previous, at least give Paratici and Conte a chance this January to conduct the window and conduct business, because they have proven from the last January transfer window that they can get it right. Now, the question is, can we get it as bang on as we did last January? I mean, it's going to be hard to repeat. It really is. Bentancur hit the ground running, Kulu's hit the ground running, etc. But for me, I think you've just got to give the guys a chance to do it rather than criticizing them before it's even opened, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Sean, any kind of
Yeah, listen, I'm going to piggyback off the back of Dave's thing. I 100% agree with Dave. Look, I spent a lot of time over the last month talking a lot about Paratici's troubles in Italy and what that looks like. It's all gone a little bit quiet on that front over the last kind of 2 weeks. And so, whilst I am a little bit scared, having done a lot of research into him and the consequences of hearing that story and trying to figure out what's going on, you read into his background. At the end of the day, innocent until proven guilty. I still believe that it's too early to judge him. I still believe that he has the potential to find unique talent in Italy until something changes on any legal front. And there's been nothing to suggest in the last 2 weeks that there's any noise yet. So we're waiting to find out. Until it happens, I'm willing to back Paratici. I also think that if you're going to back Paratici, you back him in Italy, because I think that's where he is at his strongest. And I think that Italy right now, as a league, are financially at their weakest. And so I really hope, despite my video today suggesting that there's only 13 days to grab that last 50 million out of that little escrow account, and if it doesn't happen, what sort of intent does that suggest? I still believe that there's going to be that happening. I still believe that there's going to be money to spend. And I still believe that Paratici can go out there and find a couple more gems. So I'm still, absent any matter-of-fact reason to change my opinion, and that will come, no doubt, at some point in the future. Right now, I believe that Tottenham are in a really healthy position to go out there and utilize the people that we have in place, the assets that we have in place, to go and get some business done. And I continue to believe the best in people, and I want Paratici to prove that, hopefully he hasn't got to prove his innocence. Hopefully that's just a thing. But hopefully he can go out there and identify a few players and can make us stronger. And if he had a B+/A- last January, then there's a little bit of room for improvement, and that is to go out and figure out how to solve our centre-back issues, our right-wing back issues, and maybe go and find us a creative midfielder or a deputy behind, an understudy for Decky. And if he can do all that stuff before he gets locked up, then I'll always remember him fondly.
I can't wait for the FBI raids on Paratici's pad. I can't wait for them.
And I would just want to end off on the January transfer window, Jack. I think this January is more important than last January. And for me, the reason why is last January it was about trying to improve that squad to be able to make top 4. This season, we're in top 4 going into that. Well, hopefully there's still a couple of games, but we're in top 4 going into that January transfer window. So if we can have a window that has the same impact, if not better, than last season, and identify the key areas that can make us from top 4 candidates to maybe push up towards the top, Arsenal, Man City. I mean, that's why I think this is more important now, because it's one where you can really close the gap. And who knows? We've had a lot of injuries the first half of the season. Hopefully, touch wood, that doesn't happen second half of the season. You have all your best players fit like we did to the back end of last season. February onwards, we went on, really had a strong campaign. That's where we've seen the best of Tottenham. And if Sean's right, if you can identify that centre-back, a right wing back. I would maybe push for another player in the forward areas if we could. Not a necessity, but if we could, because of the amount of injuries, we've had Son, Richarlison, Lucas, and Koulibaly injured up there.
I think you need somebody up there. You need whether it's a Malinovsky, something simple, but you need somebody that can either play in the creative or on the right wing, be understudy to Decky, because Lucas Moura is out of here. Then let's get it. Sorry, Dave. Sorry.
And no, you're spot on. And if we can have that good transfer window, we can hit the nail on the head again, Jack on Shawnee. I mean, it'll put us towards probably in a title challenge or just below that come the end of the season. Then come the summer, then you're identifying, you're going, okay, now is the time. We don't need to look for 6-7 players. This is maybe an area in the squad we can improve. Yeah. And go and get the very best player we can in that position, because we're not looking to make the money spread. So this January will set us up for the future and for the summer. And for me, it will tell us what direction this club is going in. Because if we don't get it right, there's a possibility this club is going straight back down to where it was, which is Europa Conference League and stuff like that. So
yeah, I do believe that, Dave, that conversation does start if there's no legitimate reason why they haven't. Then if Tottenham do not take that last £50 million tranche of the 150 before the end of the year, if they don't do it, then I think the conversation around where's the intention can start then.
Yeah.
Also bearing in mind that our January is the hardest January I think we could have possibly. We got to play Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City twice, all in the league, right? We got Villa, we got Portsmouth in the cup. We got so many tough games coming up. Palace away, right? It doesn't get harder than that. And so not only do we need to see, I believe, the £50 million to be taken as like a, it's like an interest-free gimme that's there to be taken. It should be taken. If it's not taken, I need to understand why. And the reasons that I've currently come up with they don't satisfy me. And then on top of that, you need the other 50 million or whatever to go and get 100 million can get you the bits you need done. But they also need to happen very quickly, because I don't want to see them come in on the 31st of January, because we'll have missed out on 8-9 games by then. So yeah, I want to see them come in the first week of Jan, or at least one of them come in early to help us out, because our January could not be harder. And
it's true.
And if those things do happen, then I'm on board. If those things don't happen, then my resolve is damaged. Like I'm as a shield up, like I'm getting arrows darting at me that are hard to.
Well, you'd have to look at it, Shawnee. I mean, there's twice they put themselves in that position, then under Pochettino and Conte, and then it's kind of like they pull the reins back a little. So you would have to re-look at it and reevaluate, because how can you do it once and then go and make the same mistake the second time round? So it'll be very, very interesting. But Jacko, I mean, what's your thoughts on everything me and Sean have said there?
I definitely got them in there at one stage. I mean, you guys absolutely bossed that section here, guys, I must say. And I think we then have kind of some leftover topics for next time for the other podcast, as well as for the fan show. What I'm going to kind of maybe summarize here, lads, is, you know me, like I love finding those, kind of hidden talent sort of kind of signings. I like thinking harder. I like making my life a bit more difficult, guys. I sort of am someone that enjoys kind of finding diamonds in the rough, because I actually think that's how you should go about it. I don't think it's really realistic for anybody to expect their football club to be a blank check, just sort of sign whatever players above 60 million that looks good type of club, kind of like Chelsea, Man United, etc. right now. I just don't really see that as a realistic way to run things. I don't see that as a smart way to run things. I also don't see that as really, let's say, even a satisfactory way to run things, considering like when you start spending money like that just every single season, it starts to become, I think, a bit fantastical. It starts to become like a bit just sort of absurd that a team can spend 200, 300 million each and every season. And if people expect clubs to start doing that, I mean, I think we'll have to adapt and, and join them, but I really don't want it to go down that sort of path. And so I'd actually rather we be one of these teams. I'd actually rather we be the team that is good at finding these 30 million, 20 million pound signings. We need to get better. What we've just realized today, we need to get better at, identifying these big club signings, because we can't just be signing 30 million, 40 million pound players. We do need to be buying.
Could not agree with you more, mate.
we need to get the Romero signings done more. Like, we need to get more Romero signings, that are like 60 million pound guys that end up changing the team forever, end up being our best players instantly, because it feels like we don't have any sort of real experience in getting that right. And that is concerning, because the Premier League landscape, guys, is going to continue to change and change and change. And while it's changing, that means we can't just solely exist on these 30 million kind of signings. We need to start getting these 60 million, 70 million kind of signings done right. And do I have faith that we're going to do it right? I actually don't. It really does feel like that's kind of where maybe we have dropped the ball a bit. Even Paratici, like you've said, Sean, has sort of kind of been not as convincing even in that department when it comes to kind of the big money signings. And even at Juventus, he wasn't actually the greatest at some of the big money signings. He actually got a lot more of those kind of secret under the radar signings done a bit better. The Romeros, the Kulusevskis at Juventus, he did quite well with. So I sort of find myself in a tricky position here, lads, where I want Spurs to continue to identify talent. I want them to continue to be a bit like a Brighton, but at the same time, we also need to get some of these 60 million pound signings right, like Man United do, like Chelsea do. And that's where I do find it like a bit confusing, is like, also, will fans accept that? Because that's not transparent. That whole strategy, when you
say Chelsea do, listen, every Tottenham fan that is the type of Tottenham fan that I've described in my rants this afternoon, they're the people that are looking at Chelsea right now thinking, no, why can't we be run by like Todd Bowley? But I'm sorry, Chelsea are 8th, right? Chelsea are 8th. Chelsea are indifferent with their results. We're indifferent in their forms, despite signing Koulibaly, despite signing Fofana for they spent 300 million already. They've just gone and signed Nkunku for another 90 million. They're throwing money around like it doesn't matter. And listen, it would be incredibly attractive if you were a Chelsea fan right now to sit there and wake up in the morning and find out that they're going to sign Gvardiol, that they're going to sign this, they're going to sign that. But at the end of the day, results matter. And Chelsea spent a fortune in the summer, an absolute fortune, 300 million already, and they're 8th.
Yeah,
right.
And they're not even playing that attractive of football.
They're playing bad football. They've already sacked their manager. I personally believe that there is a very sweet combination between having an owner who's willing to spend money. It's a fantastic thing. But to have a vision, a direction, a plan, a strategy in place, and a manager that is on board with it, and a team that buys into it. Almost like what Newcastle are showing. That 1 second, let me finish my rant. Newcastle, Dave, are showing that system right now. They've got an ownership that are willing to spend money. They've got a brilliant manager who doesn't want to over egg the pudding and sign 200 million pound players right now. Right, he wants incremental improvement. You got that Overton window. If you know the politics of Overton window, you incrementally move the narrative from being bottom of the table and lucky to survive to a Premier League team that are mid-table, to a Premier League team that are top 4, to a Premier League team that are challenging for things. Newcastle are doing that incremental position, that transition very well. Chelsea, under Bowler, whilst every Tottenham fan would look at him and think he's the ideal chairman, maybe, but probably not. Sometimes you throw money at things. And I said this before backstage. Last thing I'm going to say is there's an outside chance. It's very minuscule, but there's an outside chance that Chelsea, Dave, could become the next Everton.
Oh, I love this theory. Absolutely love that theory.
There's a massive chance it can happen. Absolute massive chance it can happen. But you've answered my question. I was going to ask you, with that sort of money, that sort of owner that comes, is there that frugality that comes with it? But apparently there is with the Newcastle one. So be interested to wait and see how that plots along. But I reckon we end this podcast on. I've got a question for everybody out there. Do you want to see the owners moved on and just get in a guy that is just going to supply unlimited amounts of money and go in that direction? And potentially be caught if there is a financial crash somewhere along the line? Or are you happy with Daniel Levy running the club, basically with a hindsight of maybe financial collapse happening? Because that's the way I look at the club, the way it's been run over 20 years, trying to do things that even if there is a financial collapse in the market like we've seen in 2007, 2008, will the club still survive beyond that? Now, will all these other clubs? I'm not so sure. But the way Tottenham run, I think they will. But look,
Yeah,
let's ask the people out there: are you happy with Levy running the club on the basis of a financial disaster and Tottenham survive after it, and we're still a club, or do you want owners that come in and spend unlimited amount of money? And then if something does happen further down the line, if there is a financial crisis, because we all see the price of cost of living going up and stuff like that, and potentially get caught out and be like, clubs that basically go out of existence.
Yeah. And would you like the club to spend big bucks each and every time, no matter what? Or would you like them to mix it up a bit more? Would you like them to be more like a Brighton? Let us know on that sort of situation as well, because we kind of discussed you kind of have to go for a middle ground maybe of that, but that's not actually very transparent. That's actually not, the clear strategy that people would want. People want a clear strategy. They want identify talent early, or they want spend big bucks. There's no middle ground usually. And
I think that's
it
one
seems
for
like
a
the middle
poll
ground
on
is actually the best choice for Spurs, which is funny enough, but it's the least transparent, the middle ground. It's the least transparent, and it's also hard
the hardest
to explain.
one to pick out, isn't it? Exactly, Jack. But on your next live stream, if this conversation crops up for whatever reason, put it out there as a poll. I'd love to see. I would love to see what if you had 500 people, 400 people that were putting there. Who would they rather be right now? Would they rather be middle ground, Mary? Would they rather be,
Moneyball, Billy Bean, or would they rather be,
or would they rather be like, Billy Brighton? Who do you want to be?
Well,
there you go, everybody.
Well, I'd say to everybody out there, get your answers into our questions at the end. Let us know what your thoughts are on absolutely everything that we spoke about today. Please get your answer into our questions into the comment section as well. Thank you very much for listening. The lesson of the day, I think, is it's not how much you spend, it's how you spend it. In Conte we trust. Come on, you Spurs.
Hit that like button on your way out, everybody.